Nobody at the reunion noticed the old man carrying an empty picture frame. Not at first. Children were racing across the lawn. Someone was tuning a guitar. The smell of smoked ribs drifted through the park. Every picnic table overflowed with cousins I hadn't seen in years. Laughter echoed everywhere, except around me. I carried the frame with both hands, no photograph inside it. Just cracked glass. People kept looking at it, then looking away. Nobody wanted to ask, until my sister finally did. "Sam, what happened?" I looked down at the empty frame for a moment. I couldn't answer. Then I said quietly, "My son burned her." The entire table went silent. Not, "My son burned the picture." Not, "My son burned an album." My son burned her. Because after 50 years together, those photographs weren't memories anymore. They were the only place my wife still smiled back at me. 3 days earlier, I still believed my family understood that. I still believed there were things nobody would ever touch. I was wrong. My name is Samuel Pierce. I'm 72. My wife, Evelyn, has been gone for 4 years. Every morning, before I watered the roses, before I made coffee, before I opened the curtains, I spent exactly 10 minutes with her, not praying, not crying, simply turning one page, one photograph every day. Some mornings it was our honeymoon, some mornings our son's first birthday, some mornings just an ordinary Tuesday in 1988 where she was laughing because I burned the pancakes. People think grief gets smaller. It doesn't. You simply become stronger carrying it. Those albums helped me carry it. Last Saturday, Ryan called. "Dad, we're having everyone over. You should bring Mom's wedding albums. Alicia wants to make a memory display." I smiled. "Really?" "Yeah, the kids have never seen them." For the first time in months, I felt excited. I spent nearly an hour choosing which albums to bring. I even polished the old walnut frame that held our wedding portrait, the same frame now resting in my hands. Broken, worthless. As my sister stared at the cracked glass, she whispered, "Who would do something like that?" I looked across the reunion field. My son had just arrived. He smiled, waved at everyone. Then his eyes met mine. The smile disappeared because he knew I hadn't come carrying a photograph. I'd come carrying the evidence. And before that family reunion ended, every person there would learn exactly why the frame was empty. Nobody spoke while Ryan walked toward me. Not my cousins, not my brothers, not even the children chasing each other across the grass. They sensed something had changed. Ryan stopped a few feet away. "Dad, you really brought that?" I looked down at the empty frame. "No, I brought what was left." His wife, Alicia, folded her arms. "Oh, come on. You're seriously doing this in front of everyone?" I answered quietly. "You already did." My oldest cousin, Martha, frowned. "What exactly happened?" Ryan sighed dramatically. "It was an accident." Alicia nodded. "Honestly, he's making it sound like we burned the Mona Lisa." Several people laughed nervously. Then I finally spoke. "No, you burned something much rarer." Everyone waited. My wife only had one wedding. There were no second photographs. There were no digital backups, no cloud storage. When those originals burned, they disappeared from this world forever. The reunion grew silent again. Alicia rolled her eyes. They were sitting in a closet. No one even looked at them. I smiled sadly. I did, every morning. That answer landed differently. People stopped looking at me. They started looking at her. Ryan rubbed his forehead. "Dad, you can't honestly expect everyone to believe we did it on purpose." I looked at him. "Did you stop her?" "No." "Did you ask before touching the albums?" "No." "When I told you to save them, what did you say?" He looked away. Nobody answered for him, so I did. "It's just paper." My younger brother slowly stood. "Ryan, those albums belonged to your mother. They weren't decorations. They were family history." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "It got out of hand." "No," I replied. "You let it happen because you believed nothing in that box had any value." For the first time, Alicia sounded defensive instead of confident. "We already apologized." I looked at her. "No, you apologized because people are watching. You laughed while they burned." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. One of my nieces quietly asked, "Uncle Sam, were all the albums destroyed?" I looked at the empty frame, then toward Ryan. "No, not all of them." Ryan frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you burned the ones I brought." His face relaxed slightly. "Oh, so there are more?" I nodded. "There are, but not where you think." 3 years earlier, after Evelyn passed away, I'd done something neither Ryan nor Alicia knew about. Not because I expected betrayal, because Evelyn had once looked at me over coffee and smiled. If anything ever happens to our photograph, I hope someone besides us remembers we existed. At the time, I laughed. She didn't. Instead, she spent an entire winter writing little notes behind hundreds of photographs, names, dates, stories, private jokes, the recipe from our first Thanksgiving, the song playing during our first dance, the reason I cried when Ryan was born, things no picture could ever explain. I couldn't bear the thought of losing those stories. So one rainy afternoon, I carried every original album downtown, not to a storage locker, not to a bank, somewhere much harder to forget. Back at the reunion, Ryan looked genuinely confused. "Dad, where are they?" I smiled for the first time that day. "Safe, but they don't belong to me anymore." His expression changed instantly. "What do you mean?" "They belong to the people who understand what memories are worth." For the first time since the fire, fear replaced confidence in both Ryan and Alicia's faces, because whatever they thought they had destroyed, they suddenly realized they hadn't even known its true value. Ryan followed me to the parking lot before I reached my truck. "Dad," I kept walking. He caught up beside me. "What did you mean, they don't belong to you anymore?" I unlocked the truck, closed the driver's door again without getting in. 4 years ago, the month after your mother died, I donated every original photograph. His eyes widened. "You what?" "I donated them." "To who?" "The Whitmore Heritage Museum." Ryan blinked. "The museum?" I nodded. "They weren't interested because they were our family. They were interested because your grandfather documented almost 60 years of local history." I watched confusion spread across his face. "You never noticed. But half those albums weren't just weddings. They contained the old church before it burned, the original Main Street, the flood of 1978, the factory your grandfather helped build, 3 generations of this town. Your mother labeled every single photograph, thousands of handwritten notes." Ryan stared at me. "You never told me. You never asked." By the following Tuesday, the museum opened its newest exhibit, Life Through the Lens of Samuel and Evelyn Pierce. People lined up outside before the doors opened. School classes booked tours. The local newspaper ran a full-page story. Television crews interviewed the museum director. Our newest collection preserves thousands of moments from families who helped build this community. Nobody mentioned money. Nobody mentioned inheritance. They talked about legacy, exactly the word Evelyn always loved. That afternoon, I wandered quietly through the gallery. Children pointed at photographs. Teenagers laughed at cars from the 1960s. An elderly woman stopped in front of one picture and began crying. "That's my parents. I've never seen this photograph before." A museum volunteer carefully handed her a printed copy. No charge. She hugged it against her chest. Watching that, I realized something. Those photographs had finally done what Evelyn always wanted. They weren't hidden inside my closet anymore. They belonged to everyone whose lives they touched. Then I heard familiar voices. Ryan, Alicia. They had come, not together, not confidently, quickly, almost like strangers entering a church. Ryan stood in front of our wedding portrait. The enlarged print stretched nearly 6 feet across the wall. Below it, a small bronze plaque read, "Donated in loving memory of Evelyn Pierce." He whispered, "I burned one of these." The museum curator overheard him. She smiled politely. "You must be family." Ryan nodded. I was. Those 3 words hit me harder than anything he'd said before. Alicia wandered toward another display. Inside the glass case sat something she immediately recognized, the empty walnut frame, the one she'd thrown beside the fire pit after the glass cracked. She frowned. "How?" the curator answered before I could. "Mr. Pierce donated the damaged frame as well. We wanted visitors to understand why preserving memories matters." Another visitor stepped closer. "What happened to it?" the curator replied. "Sometimes history isn't destroyed by disasters. Sometimes it's damaged by people who forget its value." Neither Ryan nor Alicia could lift their eyes from the floor. For the first time, they weren't embarrassed because I confronted them. They were embarrassed because complete strangers now understood what they had done. And there was nothing they could say to change it. The fire had burned photographs. But the lesson it created would outlive every person standing in that room. The museum closed at 5. I stayed until the last visitors left. Not because anyone asked me to, because for the first time since Evelyn passed away, I felt like I'd spent an afternoon with her. She was everywhere, loving in black and white photographs, holding our newborn son, dancing barefoot in the backyard, growing older beside me, one picture at a time. As I prepared to leave, the museum director hurried toward me. "Mr. Pierce, there's something you should see." He led me to the guest book. Hundreds of people had written messages. One caught my attention immediately. "Thank you for reminding me to print my family photos before it's too late." Another, "I called my father after seeing this exhibit." Another, "Your wife must have been extraordinary." I smiled. She was. A week later, the town council announced something unexpected. Every October, the community would celebrate Heritage Weekend. The museum asked if they could use Evelyn's name. They wanted the annual photography exhibit to become the Evelyn Pierce Memorial Collection. Accepted without hesitation. She would have blushed, then pretended she didn't deserve it. Ryan called that evening. His voice sounded different, smaller. "I know I don't deserve this, but could we meet?" I thought for a moment. "Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, at the cemetery." The next morning, Ryan arrived carrying fresh white lilies, the same flowers Evelyn planted every spring. He stood in front of her headstone for nearly 10 minutes before speaking. "I'm sorry, Mum. I protected my pride instead of protecting your memories." I laughed. "I should have stopped it. I failed you." His voice broke, and I failed Dad. He knelt, not because anyone was watching. There wasn't another person in sight, only him, his mother, and the silence he'd carried for weeks. Courtney arrived a few minutes later. She wasn't carrying flowers. She carried something much heavier, a small wooden box. She placed it gently on the bench beside me. I found these. Inside were dozens of tiny pieces of burned photographs. She'd spent days digging through the ashes of the fire pit, separating charred paper from charcoal by hand. "I know they'll never be whole again," she whispered. But I couldn't leave them there. For the first time, I saw genuine regret, not embarrassment, not excuses, just sorrow. I carefully closed the box. "Thank you." Those two words made her cry harder than any accusation could have. Months passed. The museum became one of the town's most visited places. Schools organized field trips. Young couples donated wedding photographs of their own. Families began preserving old albums instead of throwing them away. Without meaning to, Evelyn had started something much bigger than our family. She'd reminded an entire town that memories deserve protecting. Ryan changed too. Not overnight. Real change never happens overnight. Every Sunday, he came to my house. Sometimes we repaired old picture frames together. Sometimes we scanned photographs for elderly neighbors. Sometimes we simply sat on the porch telling stories about Evelyn. He never asked for forgiveness again. He earned it, slowly, one quiet afternoon at a time. Last month, my granddaughter Emma tugged on my sleeve inside the museum. She couldn't have been older than 8. "Grandpa, which picture is your favorite?" I looked around the gallery. Thousands of photographs covered the walls. Then I smiled. "None of these." She looked surprised. "Why?" I gently tapped the side of her head. "Because my favorite one is the one I still carry right here." She smiled, then slipped her tiny hand into mine. As we walked toward the exit, the damaged walnut frame still hung near the entrance MP, exactly as it should be, because it no longer represented what had been lost. It reminded everyone who passed it. That paper can burn, photographs can disappear, but love only survives if someone chooses to protect it. And from that day forward, no one in my family ever again called a memory, just paper.